So I went to confession at that men's conference. I told the priest the truth. He gave me absolution. I thought I was through. I threw away the drugs and poured out the beer when I got home. I made it 4 days. That next week was Holy Week. And
Oh,
I sold something huge at work on Thursday, several $100,000 worth of equipment. I came in on Holy Thursday and I wanted to celebrate. And unfortunately, instead of going to pick up my son from my father-in-law's after school, I called a drug dealer until he picked up the phone, went and picked up drugs, and the police were watching his house, and I wound up being arrested on Holy Thursday.
welcome to the Fairest Love podcast. Here we explore spiritual insights and practical strategies to help you cultivate a family life rooted in beautiful, self-giving love. Join us as we invite experts to share uplifting perspectives and actionable advice for navigating the joys and challenges of modern family dynamics.
So never showed up to pick up my son, thrown in the back of a Tahoe, wound up in one of the worst jails in the United States. On the way into jail, one of the police officers in Mercy, he asked me if I'd ever been in trouble, and I told him no. And he said, "You don't look like it, and what's your deal?" And I told him I got addicted in college, and I've been stupid, and my wife and kids don't deserve this. I want to tell my wife the truth. She probably thinks she's worried to death. I'm sure she's called me a million times looking for me. I never showed up to pick up my son. And he said, "Well, your phone's in the trunk and I can't uncuff you, but I can call her and put the phone to your ear." And in that moment, it was just a really great mercy. I called my wife. She was mad, said, "I know where you are." Or she said, "I hate you. Don't call me ever again." When she found out, she said, "I knew it wasn't just your mother. I knew something else was going on." So I wound up going into jail, staying there till 4 in the morning before they brought me back to take mug shots, and hadn't eaten or slept in 24
Yeah.
hours. I call my wife again. She tells me not to call her again. And I wound up in a jail cell by myself. And I fell asleep on the bottom bunk out of exhaustion and pulled a blanket over my head, laying face down on another blanket. And when I woke up a couple hours later and thought I was still in bed at home. It was a nightmare. And then I sat up and my head hit the bottom of a still bunk bed. And I realized I was in jail. So we didn't talk about this, but I'm 6'8" and 270 pounds. And, I was in a 6x8 cell or whatever it was. And
Yeah.
became claustrophobic very quickly, and I just started going, no, 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 this is it. Everybody's going to find out. Everybody's going to find out. And all of a sudden, like in the midst of this, just panic and feeling like I was going to have a heart attack, and honestly looking for something to take my life because I didn't think there would be a way back,
Yeah.
this feeling of peace came over me. And I can't explain it to this day, but out of my own voice, out of my own gut, I just the words came out that said, well, at least now I don't have to lie anymore. At least everybody will know who I am. And there was this freedom that I felt in the moment, this peace. And the very next thing I said was, how did I get here? And,
Yeah.
very quickly, I felt the presence of Jesus Christ enter the jail cell. Like Jonathan Rumi didn't walk in, Jim Caviezel didn't pop by, like your favorite TV or movie Jesus didn't show up,
Yeah.
but I just felt the presence of God. And he said, "John, it's the way that it was the day that you walked away from me. It was the day that you started looking at everything else in life for happiness, and you walked away from everything you used to be in me when you were younger." And so I started to cry. I started to feel remorse over the way that I'd spoken to him. I remembered the way I talked to him when my mother died. It hit me about how terrible of a husband and father I'd been. I was never physically abusive, but certainly was verbally abusive to my wife. And when she would get on my trail and, try to see what was really going on. And
Yeah.
so in that moment in the jail cell, I just felt overwhelmed to pray, something I hadn't done in a long time in my life. And to be honest with you, it had been so long, I didn't even really remember how to do it. But I hit my knees in that jail cell and I just said, "Lord, I'm sorry. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. Like I didn't mean to be this way. I don't know how I wound up this way. This wasn't the plan. I'm so sorry for the things I've said and done to you. Like it wasn't your fault with my mother. I understand that now. My wife and children deserve someone better. And Lord, like I know I don't deserve another chance, but if you would give me a chance to be with my wife and kids, I promise you I'll do whatever you want. I don't want to be in control anymore. Look at where it's gotten me. Lord,
Yeah.
I'm not in control of anything and I need you. I want you back in my life. And if you'll come back into my life, then I will give you my life. I don't know what it's worth, but if you want it, it's yours. And Lord, if you would give me a chance to be the husband and father I should have been for my wife and kids, then I'll do whatever you want. But if that's not your will, then please give them someone better than me."
Yeah.
And in a moment, I just said, "Lord, I don't want to be in control anymore. I surrender." And those were the two most powerful words I ever said. In that moment, I actually did die that day, not of suicide, but dying to myself and on that Good Friday in that jail cell along with the Lord.
Well, that's crazy that it matched up with Good Friday.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's wild. So, you're talking about this moment, and I'm assuming this is the moment that everything changed.
Yeah. Mhm.
Because, I wanted to ask you throughout this part of your story, you've mentioned so many life events in your life where
Yeah.
you made the promise to yourself, I have a kid now, so I promise I'm going to change and do better. And then now I have another kid, so I'm going to promise. And you kept making all these promises to yourself that you weren't able to keep. And I think that that's for people who are struggling with addiction. I think that's a very human thing
Yeah.
for us to make promises that like, "Oh, well, this time it's different. This time I'm going to change my ways." For many men listening, or just men in general who are kind of in a position where they're facing addiction, I think a lot of times they hit rock bottom too, and they still remain unchanged. And I know you are talking about having this Jesus moment in the cell where you're fully surrendering. When you were talking about, your moment of conversion, I think the biggest thing that struck me was the humility in it, the
Mhm.
humility of surrender. Do you think that that's something that is the unsung hero of men and just people in general, their lives, is this need for humility that nobody ever talks about?
Yeah, yeah, because society wants you to be prideful and to
Mhm.
defend for yourself. But yes, I mean, this was the moment of conversion for me. And, I think it's a place where all people struggle. And again, it goes back to what we were talking about with men and how they've been raised, right? You don't need anybody, you don't need anything,
Mhm.
admitting that you're struggling or feelings. What are feelings? Like that kind of thing. There's this association that being honest and vulnerable and humble about where you are in your life is a killer, right? That you're
Yeah.
just like that you're basically running yourself through with a sword, for about lack of better terms. And in a way, you're dying to self and saying like,
Yeah.
there's this false notion of control. The world tells you need to be in control, you need to run things, you need to be, have this unholy self reliance. And the truth is, if
Mhm.
you're in control of anything, if you think you are, hold your breath for the next 15 minutes. You can't,
Yeah.
because God wants you to breathe. There's a purpose for you. You exist now for a reason. God wants you to breathe so you'll breathe. Control is an illusion.
Mhm.
It's not even real. The
Yeah.
things that we're allowed to have any say in are the things that God allows us to have a say in. And so when we start to understand that we're all here because it's a gift from God, and that life itself is a very gift, and that we can understand that humility is exactly the gateway back to God. So in the book Power Made Perfect, like, we underline this process for healing and restoration for any person. I believe it's the
Yeah.
same for everybody. I think that we
Mhm.
all have to come to a moment, like, some people may be listening right now and go, "Oh my gosh, this story is crazy. And man,
Yeah.
cocaine and pornography and jail, and oh my gosh, I can't stop listening to this." I've
Yeah.
heard that for years. And people go, "Well, that's not my story. I've never done anything like that." No, but
Mhm.
you've got something. We all
Yeah.
do.
Everyone's got something.
Yeah, we all do. Anger, unforgiveness, judgment, all those things, blaming other people for our issues. Like, we all have something. It doesn't all have to be
Mhm.
just addictions. We can be addicted to other things besides substances, right? Anger and things like that. So
Yeah.
the thing is, how do we come out of those things? Well, St. Paul, in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9, he cries out to the Lord. He's kind of lamenting over all the terrible things that have happened to him in the previous chapter serving the Lord. And he's like,
Yeah.
"Lord, please remove this spiritual thorn from my side 3 times." He said the devil placed it there so I wouldn't become too elated. And so he said, "Lord,
Mhm.
remove this." And God says, "No, my grace is sufficient for you. For my power is made perfect in weakness." It's not about you. It's not about your power. You cannot do all these things that you're trying to do. And the reason you're unhappy, the reason that you're always hurting yourself, the reason that you're running to other things is because you keep beating your head against the wall and expecting different results. And they're never going to be different, right? That's the
Yeah.
definition of crazy. What St.
Yep.
Paul came to understand was like, all right, in my weakness, if I'm weak, then that's what it means is I'm weak and I'm not good enough and I'm not enough and I should be better and God can't love me. And God's like, no, that
Mhm.
weakness is the starting point. Like, you finally have come down off of your pedestal down to where you have to look at me and realize that you can't do anything of any substance without me. Like, that
Mhm.
your strength is my strength, and that's what I want to give you. So St. Paul goes on to say, if I'm to boast, let me only boast in my weaknesses, my hardships, my difficulties, and my calamities, because when I'm weak, I'm strong. He gets it.
Yeah.
Like, it's in my weaknesses. I realize I need God. I surrender. So there's this process of vulnerability. There's something in my life, and maybe I haven't come to grips with it yet. Maybe I know it's
Mhm.
there, but I'm not being honest with myself. You see this sometimes when we come through Advent and we get into January, and next thing you know, it's the first week of February, and somebody goes, "Man, hey, Ash Wednesday's coming up in 2 days. What are you giving up?" You're like, "Oh man." And
Yep.
immediately when you hear that, God points you right at the thing that you need to be rid of. You drink too much. You need to put the booze down. You
Mhm.
do that. You're unforgiving. You need to forgive that person. You're whatever it is.
Yeah.
But we whistle past the graveyard and go, nope, not that, and I'll just give up chocolate. And that's what we continue to do in our life. And St. Paul's like, no, to admit that we're not perfect, that we don't have figured it out, that we're not, some mighty machines that don't need anybody or anything is
Mhm.
exactly the path to understanding and allowing God into our life. So that vulnerability, being real about what I struggle with myself, God, and other people, leads you to humility. So I have a problem. I can't handle it. There's a God and I'm not him. Humility, which leads
Yeah.
you to surrender. Now I realize in my
Mhm.
humility that I've lived contrary to God and I need to surrender. So Lord, please, I'm sorry for what I've done. That leads us to repentance. We go to confession. Through repentance, the grace and mercy of God pours out through reconciliation. Now we can go out and live with that grace and mercy. We've reconciled and we're in the right relationship, and we can go out and we can live and start to heal. God says, okay, now here's the part you're not going to like. You're like an onion, and all these issues that you've had, the anger, why you can't stop doing this, you can't stop doing that. You've been like confessing the symptoms, but there's
Mhm.
roots below the surface with wounds and things that have happened to you and difficulties. And we got to enter into that because that's where healing begins. So he wants to peel us back by an onion, like an onion. And you're going, whoa, thank you, Lord, I'm healed. Dang it,
Yeah.
there's another layer. And he's got to
Mhm.
peel that and peel that. And through the healing process, we start becoming restored. We start
Yeah.
becoming more like God. And that's a journey that's going to happen through the rest of our life. And that's certainly what happened to me after jail. And, my wife stayed with me. She met me in the visitation room at jail, and I thought it was over. And she said, John, I'm not going to divorce you. It has nothing to do with me with
Mhm.
you, and everything to do with God, the vows I made to God in the church that day. She stayed
Yeah.
with me because of her faith. And that gave me an opportunity to reconcile with my father over Easter,
Mhm.
to reconcile with God, to come home to my family after, seeking treatment and things like that, walking away from the things of the world,
Mhm.
realizing I had to be different for my family, reading 50 to 60 Catholic books in the first year, having a priest that took me under his wing and
Yeah.
made me lecture every day, made me go to mass every day, and made me go to confession every Friday. And then
Mm.
eventually he said, John, you found a way back. I think you
Uh-huh.
could help men. And so he challenged me to start a men's group in my parish, and him and another man. And I walked into a room one night in our parish with 30 men, some I knew and some I didn't. I went to reach for the door, and they had no idea why we called him there. And the devil immediately jumped on me and goes, if you go in there and you tell people what happened in your life, you're going to lose things. They're going to kick your kids out of school. Your wife's going to be
Mm.
more embarrassed. And, don't do this. And I'll tell you the truth. I let go of that door and I took, 3 steps towards the parking lot. And I heard what you hear Elijah talk about in the Old Testament, that God wasn't in the wind and in the storm. He was he was in the whisper. And I heard
Yeah.
Jesus say, John, you told me if I'll let you walk out of that cell and you had your family back, that you'd become the man I need you to be. Turn around and open that
Mhm.
door. So long story short, I walked in the room full of men, and all we had at our parish was like a men's club. We had a school, so we had the
Yeah.
fundraising club, beer drinking, barbecue cooking, staying out way too late,
Yeah.
meetings that last 10 minutes, and drinking that last 4 hours, and all that stuff. And then we had Knights of Columbus, and we had 300 men on the roster, but only 6 there that would show up and do anything. And so there was nothing really spiritual that was affecting men in any way. And so I walked
Yeah.
in the room and I said, guys, we got a great men's club.
Mhm.
We raise money, we get jerseys for the kids, but we never talk about Jesus. And let me tell
Yeah.
you what can happen in your life when that's the case. And I went blah, and I ugly snot cried in front of these guys for 30 minutes at least, like telling them way more than what I've told you. And because it
Uh-huh.
was obviously a lot more fresh, then. And I remember at the end going, oh my gosh, what have I done? All their eyes were this big around, like yours have gotten a couple of times. And I just said, look, Father wants me to start a men's group. I don't know what the heck I'm doing, but
Yeah.
I'm tired of going through life alone. And I can't be the only
Mhm.
one that needs Jesus, the only one that's broken. And
Yeah.
so I sat down and fully expected men to go, the heck with this, man. What the heck was it? And leave.
Mhm.
And one by one, every man in that room started to stand up and share the brokenness of their own life. The guys talking
Yep.
about, you think I've got this perfect Catholic family, but I've been addicted to porn for 5 years. And my wife left 3 weeks ago and took the kids, and I got papers in the mail today, or I care more about my job and money than I do my wife and kids by the way I spend my time. One
Mm.
guy got up and he was intoxicated. He wobbled and was like, I've been in a hotel room in downtown Memphis all day. I've had a case of beer. My wife and I have 9 kids. And because of the stress and everything with money and just getting kids everywhere and all that, we fight a lot. And when we fight, I escape. She thinks I'm at work. Work thinks I'm at home sick.
Mhm.
And I've been in a hotel room drinking all day. And I just showed up here because all we ever do up here is men is drink. And by one, every man started sharing their brokenness. That's where St. Paul's verse came into play. That men's group I've been a part of now for 10 years. We met
Mhm.
every Wednesday night and we get real and we talk about what's really going on in our lives. A lot of ministry thing for men, women. It's like, hey, show up and we're going to watch this video series. And then we're
Yeah.
going to talk about it surface level really quickly. And then it's see you next week, Nancy, or see you next week,
Yeah.
Cliff. And none of
Mhm.
us ever wind up coming into real relationship with each other. And the one thing I believe the church is really suffers at, is not really
Mhm.
great at, is accompaniment. We're
Yeah.
great at the magisterium and rules and tradition and knowledge and truth and wisdom and beauty and all of those things. And that is 100% necessary in what draws me to the church.
Yeah.
But to get to that place, we have to remember that all of it is about relationship. And if our parishes don't have places to go where people can go with real struggles, like, yeah, that's great. You're going to do a small group on the Summa, but I
Mhm.
can't even figure out how to have a conversation with my wife without fighting. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not worried about the Summa. Where's God in the fact that I can't even communicate with my wife? Where's God in the
Mhm.
fact that I can't stop watching porn? Where's God in the fact that I'm disgusted with myself and I don't think I'm worth anything? That's where
Mhm.
people want to be met. So we work with parishes. The podcast has got almost 400 episodes, and it's
Yeah.
me and my buddy, but we also have we've had Sister Miriam and all these great people on, and but the podcast spawned a call for ministry, and I knew the Lord was calling me into ministry. I he made it so obvious where I walked away from that job, went into a small ministry job just to get on the pew
Mhm.
started, all of this stuff. And eventually I was like, okay, Lord, well, what do you want to do? I'm not Dr. Hahn. I can't write a book on Revelations in like an hour and a half or whatever it takes him. And, I'm not Christophanic standing on pews, both of them good friends, but
Yeah.
like, yelling joy. What am I supposed to do? And he's like, John, go and do what you've done. Like, go and share your witness and give people hope, but then also
Mhm.
lead them into the truth of identity, the truth of their identity and purpose and joy, but also take the skills that you've learned and pass them on. So what we do is not just we don't just go to a parish and go, oh, you want a men's group? Here's a DVD set. Good luck. Instead, what
Yeah.
we do is we say, give us 10 to 12 guys and let me work with them. We're going to establish a team. And we have these 4 pillars of one night groups meet for a formation night. Where's God in my mess? Night
Mhm.
two is worship. We're going to come together and partake in the sacraments and adoration together. The third night of the month is, and it's always on the same night, like Wednesday at 7. It's Wednesday at
Yeah.
7. But then we have service where we go and make sandwiches for the homeless. We'll go to Catholic retirement homes and visit people who have nobody to be with them and things like that. We live the faith. And then the fourth
Yeah.
night, we get out, we just fellowship. We go throw axes, we go to ball games, we have cornhole tournaments and cigars around a fire and
Mhm.
we built these relationships first and foremost with Christ and with each other, and men are being called higher. And that's how we've started, over 100 groups around the country. And there's, like I said in the beginning, there's two heroes of this story, and I'm not one of them. It's my wife and it's Jesus.
Yeah.
And in the midst of that, what I've come to know is what Pope Paul VI said, and I'm going to
Mhm.
slaughter this and say it incorrectly, I'm sure. But he said, the world is in need of great teachers. And
Yeah.
if you're going to be a great teacher, first be a great witness. And so
Mm.
I haven't been to seminary. I don't have a theology degree, but what I have is I've encountered Jesus. And it's kind of like Peter and John, they show up after, the Acts of the Apostle starts and they come out of the upper room and they walk up to the cripple outside of the temple. And he's like, I want alms, right? And I want alms. And this guy has become, if you read the story, he's having to have people bring him there and sit him on those steps. He's literally in a miserable life sitting at what they call the beautiful gate. And
Yeah.
he's probably it sounds like he's become so used to the way his life is. It's never going to get any better than this. This is always the way it's going to be. There's no hope for me. And then
Mhm.
one day, Peter and John walk by and the guy says alms, right? And what he's asking for is the same things the world keeps giving him, but doesn't get him out of that situation, that doesn't
Yeah.
bring him to a new place. And so what does Peter say? He says, my brother, what you have, I do not have. What you ask for, silver and gold, I do not have. But what I
Mhm.
do have is Jesus of Nazareth, and in his name, stand and walk. right? The things of the world that you keep going after, you're still here every day.
Yeah.
You're not you're not thriving, you're surviving. And so that's the
Mhm.
message of this ministry. That's what we're trying to teach to men and women is like, hey, you might dress like G.K. Chesterton and quote C.S. Lewis with the best of them. But if we're not entering into the heart, if we're not entering into this place of encounter and growing in
Yeah.
our relationship with God and others, we're going to be a lot of people that know, we're going to be people that know a lot of smart things, but don't know the one thing that matters.
Yeah, exactly. So for the guy who is listening, who is like, okay, this sounds great, like this idea of community, but then there's that fear of seeming inadequate and not wanting to be vulnerable for fear of being judged. But then also maybe that fear of, well, I don't have anything like John, you just mentioned your whole story of addiction. And then you mentioned the people at your men's group who also are fighting with addiction and are having really strong issues that they're having to deal with. Like for the guy who maybe doesn't have necessarily the crazy stuff going on, but still needs to have that humility to work on the smaller things, how
Mhm.
would you suggest he get over his fear of feeling judged that he doesn't have something as big and it's just,
Sure.
hey, I get angry at my kids and I can't get over. I need to work on patience, but it seems inadequate compared to everything else that everyone is dealing with. How do you reassure the man who is struggling with the smaller things, but still needs to find redemption in the smaller things?
Yeah. Yeah, first of all, don't fall to comparison because, yeah, maybe you don't have some crazy story, and God bless that you don't because it was,
Yeah.
really painful and it hurt a lot of people in my life, and it's things that I'm not that person anymore, that's why I could share it because I have become
Uh-huh.
somebody different. Saul was no longer Saul, he was Paul, and, well, I didn't get a name change, like, the same things happened for me, right? And
Yeah.
so all of us, if when you start comparing, I mean, you know this, you could do this in this world that we're in. Well, so and so has so many followers and their show.
Yeah.
So well, it's a dead end road. What you need to do is focus on you and the Lord, right? And what is
Hmm.
the Lord trying to do with you? And if you are tired of yelling at your kids, then get sick and tired of being sick and tired. Like at
Yeah.
some point, we have to look at ourselves. And then again, to your point, in a world that tells you to blame everybody else for your problems, for point the finger everybody else, and we
Hmm.
ruin relationships and we struggle in these ways because it can't possibly be us because that would mean we would have to deal with things. This
Yeah.
is what it means to be a man. This is spiritual maturity. You want to be a man, be brave enough and man enough to look at yourself and go, what are my problems? Because
Hmm.
my job is to be the spiritual leader of my family. I'm supposed to be
Yeah.
the priest, prophet, and king of my family. And if there are issues in my family, if my children are not being led, then not only am I letting myself down, I'm letting others down. So I can't like, well, if my wife wouldn't do this, I wouldn't do this. What does that sound like? It sounds
Yeah.
like two kids that get in trouble that go to their parents. Okay, what happened? Well, he did this, but she did that, and he did. It's Adam and Eve did it in the beginning, right? It
Yep.
was the woman. Well, it was the snake. Well, God, you're the one that
Hmm.
gave me both. It was just this blame game. And we
Yep.
can't do that. Like when we do that, we refuse to say, you know what? I'm not perfect. And there are things wrong
Hmm.
with me, whether it's staying up till 2 in the morning and hiding a cocaine addiction or secretly watching porn once a week on my phone. Whatever
Hmm.
it is, like we all have something. And
Yeah.
our whole life is about being honest with ourselves in that. So get sick and tired of being sick and tired and start going, okay. A guy says to me all the time, I get tired of going to confession because I'm tired of telling Father the same thing over and over again. Well,
Yeah.
look at it like this. You're going to confession and this is Dr. Bob Schutz's example. You're walking by, this apple tree, you pull your apple, that's your sin, you take it in there and you go, here you go, Father. And you get absolution, you come out and dang it, if the apple's not already right back in the same place. Well,
Uh-huh.
wait a minute. Well, I just confessed it. Why? Because underneath what you could see is a root system under the ground. And all that you see, the tree, the limbs, the fruit, that's all they're all extensions of what is going on in the roots. So
Uh-huh.
until you get the root of why you're having issues, whether they're large or small, then
Uh-huh.
one like a white lie. Well, it's just a white lie. Well, as soon as you become okay with one little white lie, you become with another and another and another. I didn't start off doing cocaine. I became okay with stopping going to church. And I became
Yeah.
okay with drinking, and then I became okay with drugs, and then I became okay with harder drugs, and then I became okay with lying and all that stuff, and I wound up in a hell. So
Yeah.
we like to say, well, I'm not as bad as so and so. I'm not that tax collector or all that stuff,
Mhm.
and that's how we get into trouble. So what I would
It
say
snow
is,
builds
right,
or
right,
snowballs.
snowballs. Yeah, snowballs, and
Snowballs.
then you're like me, "How did I get here?" And so I would say you have to have that humility. You have to
Mhm.
start going, "Okay, instead of pointing the finger everywhere else, I'm gonna look interiorly first. Why do
Yeah.
I keep doing the things I'm doing? Why, if big or small?" And
Mhm.
and I have to admit that there's an issue there that God wants to do in that. That's the real work of Jesus. If you
Yeah.
look at Isaiah 61, it's one of my favorite scriptures. It's a prophecy about Jesus. And it says, "The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me. He has anointed me to bring good tidings to the afflicted, to comfort those who mourn, to free those who are in prison." Right? This is
Mhm.
what Jesus came to do. It's not just, "Oh, I know Jesus died on the cross and now, he opened the door to salvation. And if I'm good enough, I get to heaven." No, we have to participate in that, right? We have
Yeah.
to participate in it, but also we have to understand that this is the work of Christ. I came to heal. I came to restore. I came to comfort. I come to free those who are bound. Everybody listening to this can find themselves in one of those positions. That's
Mhm.
the ongoing work of Christ. And so we have to participate by saying, because God is love, he's not going to force his way in. Without
Yeah.
free will, love doesn't exist. So he's never going to make us, but he stands at the ready to come into these places in our life for power to be made perfect. To get back to the title of the book, as long as we allow him, the only thing that keeps us from being the people that we want to be is our thinking we're not good enough, that God can't help us, that his mercy isn't good enough, and standing in the way. So I would say to somebody that's struggling, large or small, you've probably trusted in a lot of other things. And
Mhm.
there's one thing you can trust in that will break you free. And maybe it's
Yeah.
time to give that thing a try.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure there are plenty of guys listening who are like, this sounds great. Like, I need a group, but
Mhm.
there's literally nothing at my
Yeah.
church. And the group that I went to that one time has three old men who are in their 80s and they don't really understand the things that I'm talking about. So for the guy who wants the community but can't find it, what would you suggest he do?
I would suggest they get on our website and start a conversation with us, because this is where we're different than a lot of other ministries out there. A lot
Yeah.
of the ministries in the church, not to knock anything or anything like that, but it's sort of, "Oh, you have a need. We've made a generic thing to fill that need, and good luck.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a one page, how to
Yeah.
run get a box of donuts, put on a video, and do your thing."
Yeah.
But what we do is we say, "Look, we understand the issues." I'm not a guy talking about men's ministry from a place of guessing of what I think it is. I've been involved in it every week of my life for 10 years. I know what it's
Mm-hmm.
like to run a successful men's group, what it takes, that you can't do it by yourself. And I also know what it's like to be in the position of the man you're talking about. Well, what could I do? I have no
Yeah.
degrees. I don't know the Bible. You're sitting here quoting verses. Well, I
Yeah.
wasn't always like that for me. My journey with God through all this, I had to trust. And then I started to understand I needed others. And there were other
Mm-hmm.
people that wanted the same thing I wanted in my life, that wanted to be a better husband, brother, father, and son, and they were willing to come alongside me. So
Yeah.
what I would tell them is, don't worry about what you don't have. This is a problem with Christians all over the board. We think, well, if I start to live differently, then it's going to cost. What is it going to cost me? Or what?
Yeah.
I'm deficient and I don't have enough. It's always about the inadequacy. We never look to the reward, that maybe if we
Mhm.
actually step forward and do what God's asking, that he will give us everything we ever need. And that's the truth. There is no explanation. I'm leading 30 some odd people to Poland on Monday.
Yeah.
There's no reason. 10 years ago, I was sitting in a jail cell on the verge of taking my own life. And now I'm about to lose. I mean, not lose. I hope I don't lose them. I need to bring them all back. But I'm about to lead a pilgrimage to Poland. And like, I'd never, if somebody told me that 10 years ago, I'd be like, "You're freaking nuts." Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to make it out of the jail cell alive, because
Mhm.
God could do more than we could ever imagine. The only thing,
Yeah.
again, that's in his way is our yes, is believing he can do it. So it starts with you going, "You know what? Dang the torpedoes. I'm going to go to John's website at justaguyonthepew.com. And look, you're going to find out this ministry is very quickly not about me. Do I do the work? Yes. But on the first
Mhm.
page, I think you have to look to even find a picture of me, because
Yeah,
it's
it took
not
a while
about
for me to
me."
find you.
Yeah, it's not about me. It's about what we're trying to do. So you
Yeah.
click a button, start men's ministry. There's going to be a form that pops up: name, email, parish, phone number. What are you looking to do? And
Mhm.
then you actually, after you submit that, there's a box that comes up next that says schedule a call with John. We have a
Mhm.
Calendly app. You can schedule a call with me right then, an hour long call, so I can hear what's going on. We can start talking about it. We can build a plan, and you can be the next parish that didn't have something and does.
Mhm.
This is what happened with David, right? No one would fight Goliath. David probably walked up and like, I have no idea. I have no business being here. And what am I going to do? The one thing I
Yeah.
know is God is with me. And
Mhm.
then his whole life changed and Israel's life changed and future changed all because of that. So this is the moment. This is the heroic moment that we're all looking for. It's not always pushing a best friend out of the front of a bus. Sometimes it's just saying, I'm going to believe that God who is who he says he is, and that I can be who he wants me to be. And the first step is just clicking this button, getting on a call with John Edwards, and then maybe 5 years, 8 years, 10 years from now, you're sitting there going, I can't believe what the Lord's done in my life the way that I
Yeah,
am.
for sure. That's great advice. We do have some women listeners, and you
Sure.
mentioned that your wife is the unsung hero of the
Yeah.
is not the unsung hero. She is the hero, one of the
Yeah.
heroes of this story. What is something that women can do that can help the men in their lives step into the role of being the man that they are called to be, that God is calling them to be?
Yeah. I would think one thing that's important that doesn't get talked about enough is if we know that the desire of men's like what men the ache, the need they have is to know they're enough, then to do
Mhm.
what you can to try to build men up in that way. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, if you're disappointing your husband, let him know you're disappointed. But, don't question his manhood and insult him and all those things like that, the way we can do sometimes when we get angry. Because
Yeah.
trust me, if he messes up, he feels bad enough. We all experience that. Like, I don't need somebody else to tell me how bad I messed up. So
Mhm.
a lot of people, you need to get off your rear end and you're not like so and so's husband. Her husband's great. And if you were more like him, all that
Yeah.
does is build resentment and and he turns away from a spouse, starts turning to other things. Because what a man needs more than anything is to know I'm enough. A woman needs to know that she matters, that she's beautiful,
Mhm.
that she's seen, right? And so when we know we have these innate needs, what we need to do is love each other well in those, even when we're
Yeah.
disappointed, even when things don't turn out the way we want, even when a guy may be slower to becoming who you want him to be than the pace you want him to, not
Mhm.
tearing him down, not making him feel worse, not kicking him, but saying like, honey, I see what you're doing. I see the efforts you're making. And I know that you're not perfect. And what happened earlier, I know you probably didn't want, and we're still working on things, but I see that you're trying to be different. I see that you're working to better yourself, and that means something to me. When we speak to each other that way and we lift each other up instead of tearing each other down, we become what we need to be for each other, this nucleus with God at the center and our children, where we can build a family and a life and a world of goodness and building people up and not tearing people down, right? And there's enough people in the world that want to tear us down. I tell my kids that
Yeah.
all the time when they start fighting. I'll say, hey, we don't do that with each other because there's enough people in this world that will hate you, that will kick you, that will be mean to you. We don't do it to each other. We're the
Mhm.
ones that lift each other up and we love each other well so that we can handle and be there for each other in the times where the world does that to us. So that's the advice I would give women is just to remember that I don't think any guy wakes up any day and goes, man, I want to be a terrible husband and father today. Like, I don't think anybody just wakes up and goes, I cannot wait to wreck my family's life.
Yeah.
We're all carrying a lot. Men are carrying the responsibility of being providers and all these things too.
Mhm.
And I know women carry that responsibility in today's world too. But just be
Yeah.
kind to one another. Put yourself in the other one's place. Don't be so quick to live out of, well, they did this and so this and they don't deserve this. Try to put yourself in the other person's shoes. That's what Jesus was saying over and over again. Love each other well,
Yeah.
and that's what we're called to do. That's what Jesus would do. And I think that's the answer to combating the issues of the world and the pressures that we feel that we often take out on the ones that we love the most.
100%. And I would also add that, loving each other well doesn't mean just affirming them, because
Yeah.
I think what's so powerful about your story is that your wife, in that moment when you called her from jail, she held you accountable. And so to love someone well is to acknowledge, yeah, you've messed up and you're going to maybe deal with this consequence because, for me to just blow it off or
Right.
affirm you isn't loving you. It's
Sure.
not. It's not as love is not as watered down as just saying, well, this is who you are. And
Yeah. No, you don't want to
it's,
do that.
it's
No.
building them up.
Yeah, the affirmation is that I was talking about is just knowing the struggle of man, and when a guy is trying
Yeah,
to do everything he can to
100%.
better himself, to do that, and then, yeah, certainly anytime that there's behaviors that need to be called out, to do it in love. Everything we do is in love, but to also hold people accountable for the standards that we all should hold each other accountable for. So I couldn't
Yeah,
agree with you more.
100%. And I didn't think that you were meaning that. I just know
Sure.
that people tend to misconstrue the word love
Yes. Amen.
and
Yeah.
not fully
Loving
understand.
you means letting you do whatever the heck you want and not saying anything. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. This has been such an amazing conversation, John. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for giving, me so much of your time and sharing your story with our listeners. Where can people find you?
Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you for probably going longer than you normally do. It's a long story and there's so many things to get into. But yeah, people can find me at justaguyonthepew.com. It's really the best place. We have a YouTube channel that you can go to. We're on every audio platform out there. So that's all on the website. You can even watch that stuff on the website. We have a store there, so you can find the book there. If your listeners do want to copy the book, I know the easiest thing of today is to go to Amazon and take
Mhm.
advantage of that free shipping. But if you do get it from the website, I'll sign it for you. I'm signing the copies and sending them out. And if it's before Father's Day, I don't know when this episode's coming out, but if it is, we have some bundles with, Crux and Victor, our rosary partners for our original rosaries, our wrist, our triple wrap rosaries, t-shirts, all that stuff in the book. So lots of stuff to give a guy for Father's Day and to get out there like that. If this comes out, if not, you can cut this out, whatever. But
No
but
worries.
uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, the website's the best place where you can launch a men's ministry. You can find our resources, the work we do with John Paul, Second Healing Center, all that stuff. And we'd love to have you come visit so we could walk alongside you and accompany you in the faith journey.
Amazing. This will be out before Father's Day. So
Okay, good.
definitely head to the website and check out all of the amazing resources. As always, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Fairest Love podcast. We will see you next Tuesday.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fairest Love podcast. In 2026, we continue to share the devotion to Mary, Mother of Fairest Love. If you like what you heard on today's show, please visit our website at fairestlovefamilyproject.org, where you can find additional podcasts and other resources for families. Be sure to also check us out on social media at Fairest Love Project. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you on an episode soon.